you want to be a high vibe individual, then stay tuned towards till the end of the video. Because in today's video, we are going to talk about what it means to be a high vibrational individual. Hello ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to Evolving Consciousness. Today, the most trending topics in YouTube are anything to do with law of attraction, with the fact of raising vibration. You will be bombarded with tons and thousands of videos wherein people talk about pragmatic ways to raise vibrations. And I agree with the shared content. But one thing most of the YouTubers fail to acknowledge and fail to address is they don't disclose the mechanics of consciousness. And they also don't give a very strong reasoning as to why we need to do what they are suggesting. My today's video is my humble attempt to unravel the layers of consciousness and what it really means to be a high vibrational individual. And to begin with, I want to quote what Nikola Tesla talked about this entire subject of dynamics and vibration. He said, if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, vibration, and frequency. So when we talk about this high vibe zone, to be in a high vibe zone 24/7, what is it all about? Because when folks are exposed to this kind of content for the very first time, they tend to become cosmetically high vibe. What I mean by cosmetically high vibe, they look at a couple of videos, they listen to a couple of podcasts, and they tend to artificially pretend to be high vibe individuals without understanding the soul of consciousness, without understanding the mechanics of consciousness. Today we'll understand as to what it means to be a high vibe individual and what were the reasons why people suggested certain things, and essentially what are they aiming towards or pointing towards. In my previous video, I gave an introduction as to what are the three basic modes of nature from the Bhagavad Gita. We talked about the 14th chapter of Srimad Bhagavad Gita, where Lord Krishna basically is characterizing entire reality into three principal blocks. Block number 1 is Sattva, block number 2 is Rajas, block number 3 is Tamas. Sattva, let's do a quick recap before we go into the main crux of the video. Sattva essentially is mood of goodness. Anything which can be characterized with a feeling of contentment, which can be attributed to nobility, serenity, tranquility, a sense of service, a sense of gratitude, heartfelt gratitude. And there are more things which can be attributed to Sattva. When there is a sense of purity in thoughts, now when I talk about purity, I am not talking about it in the context of morality, but purity of thoughts in general. Truth, thoughts of love, kindness, compassion, empathy, sympathy, and a dispassion and a genuine desire to give and to grow in all directions. These are the characteristics of Sattva, the mode of goodness. Now let's talk about Rajas. Rajas is basically mode of passion. It basically prompts mental activity. It basically is sort of catalyst for all actions. But it is colored with hues of restlessness and anxiety. Rajas is basically a selfish ambition, a desire which is driven through selfishness. And one thing which is very marked characteristic of Rajas is when your desires are fulfilled, it converts into greed. And when your desires are not fulfilled, it turns into anger. So anger and greed are hallmark qualities of Rajasic propensities. So there are a lot of us who are accustomed, habitual perpetuators of anger, of greed, of jealousy. All these are coming under the block of Rajasic tendencies. And the lowest grade of consciousness is called tamas, which is nothing but the mode of ignorance. Now this can be associated with ignorance, apathy, depression, lethargy, procrastination, a habitual state of procrastination, a desirelessness to do anything new, a lot of resistance. There are a lot of people who sort of resist learning something new. They always want to be in their own zone. They are always prone to lethargy and procrastination. These are the people who are puppets of tamasic propensities. Now, as we discussed in a lot of detail about these three characteristics and the fact that every human being and everything which is present in reality, they are essentially permutations and combinations of these three propensities, which was talked about in a lot of detail in Bhagavad Gita. Now, one thing you'll realize when we talk about being a high vibrational being, if you look at the scale of consciousness, which Dr. David Hawkins also talked about in his book Map of Consciousness, wherein he calibrates every human emotion to a certain level of strength. Now, that is a different topic altogether. To boil it down to a very simple terminology, he essentially is gauging a benchmarking different emotions at different calibration levels. Essentially, he's saying he's just calibrating and putting a language of English in labeling certain emotions like anger, fear, apathy, grief, and towards the high end of the spectrum, towards the top of the consciousness, we have emotions like love, peace. Now, just try to sync it with the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, and you will be mesmerized to note that all these things were talked about in Gita 5,000 years back. And essentially, what all these practices, which all the YouTubers are so much displaying and they're spreading these practices to be in a high vibrational state, essentially they are encouraging us to develop sattvic qualities or sattva. Because let's remember, we all have different proportions of each of these three qualities. And when you engage yourself in these activities, you are essentially increasing the mode of goodness within. Now, let's get back to this concept of raising vibration. As I mentioned, these activities which the people talk about, be it engaging in meditative practices, be it activities like spending time in nature, essentially they are increasing the sattvic tendencies of the mind. Now, the biggest and the most powerful way to increase the mode of goodness or the sattvic tendencies is to take the shelter of spirituality, the spiritual practices, and sort of accustom ourselves to be an habitual orchestrator, to be an habitual recipient of spiritual knowledge in general. Because we talked about the 9 gates through which we interact with the world, and the primary gates, the eyes, the ears, the mouth, these are the ones which condition us mostly. The influence these 3 senses have on our consciousness are the most predominant. So it's very important for us to expose ourselves to the right kind of information. Now, spirituality, when we talk about spirituality, right, a lot of stereotypes and a lot of things automatically pop up in the mind of people. And there are a lot of reasons as to why people don't have a certain need, a certain propensity towards understanding spirituality and to cultivate the wisdom which is given through this phenomenal subject of spirituality. Now, you might be thinking of Sattva is so blissful, is so serene, is so good, then why is not the entire world harboring or going towards spirituality? Why is it that only a few people even think about digesting spiritual knowledge? Now, the answer is probably multi-layered. There are a couple of reasons to that, and we'll dig into each one of them. Now, number one reason why people don't take up into spirituality or expose themselves to spirituality is because there is a lot of pleasure in indulging in rajasic and tamasic propensities. And the fun part about rajasic and tamasic propensities is you get a sense of instant gratification. You don't have to wait to experience pleasure. Now, let me give you a simple example. Let's say somebody enjoys gossiping or somebody enjoys pulling down others. Now, the reason why gossiping is so enjoyable is because there is a certain amount of rajasic and tamasic ras associated with it. There is a certain level of pleasure and satisfaction which the individual derives out of it. That is the reason why people engage in it. Everything which gives us pleasure in the short term may not be the great thing, may not be the best thing for our consciousness, but people enjoy it. And that's the reason majority of the population, most of humanity, are succumbed to these instant gratification urges. And that's the reason very few people take up to this concept of spirituality and contemplate and ponder upon the wisdom which is available to the masses. Also, a struggle which a lot of people face, which I am also not alien to, is the fact that when you start talking about spirituality and you try to implement, you take baby steps in implementing the principles of spirituality in your day-to-day life, there are a lot of times when you feel frustrated. There are a lot of times when you feel a lot of struggle in living by those values which have been talked about. Now, the fun part is, spirituality or this tendency, spiritual practices might seem tedious and cumbersome at the beginning, but the eventual payout of these practices are way higher than indulging in the Rajasic and Tamasic propensities or pleasures. Things which are giving us short-term pain for long-term pleasure is essentially good for us in the long term. But things which gratify our senses in the instant, which make us happy in the moment, don't tend to be enduring. Please focus on the word I'm using, enduring. What does enduring mean? What does endurance mean? Enduring means that a state of happiness, a regularized state of being. You might feel happy for a couple of minutes when you engage yourself in Rajasic and Tamasic activities, but that will die down over a period of time. But if you enhance Sattvagun or mode of goodness, this is going to give you a sense of enduring peace and happiness. The level of peace, the level of equanimity which you are going to experience by increasing the level of Sattva in your own consciousness is going to be evident to you not in the initial days but in the long run. And because people don't like that initial struggle, most of us don't like to talk about spirituality. And there is another big reason why people don't want to inculcate spiritual practices and the concept of spirituality in general. Now, they see people who are following spiritual practices, and when they see these people get angry, or probably they are consumed by a thought of lust or a thought of greed, they suddenly judge them and tell them, oh, what is the use of all these spiritual practices, man? You just got angry. They get an immediate justification point as to why they should not practice spirituality, because they find an individual who claims and who is practicing spirituality diligently for a period of years, but a situation arises and he just lost his temper and he became angry, or he became fearful, or he became lustful, or he became remorseful. Now, one thing to understand and take a step back is, I want to give a rebuttal to this thought process with a real life, quoting a real life incident which happened in the United States with one of the ardent devotees of Srila Prabhupada. Now, Srila Prabhupada is basically the founder Acharya of Krishna consciousness, and one of his bhaktas was a United States national, right? He was an American citizen. So one fine day, this American citizen who had given his life to the concept of Krishna consciousness, which is a spiritual thought process which talks about the concept of Krishna consciousness, he had devoted his life to that. One fine day, this person is traveling from one place to another in a two-wheeler, and he is in a bit of a hurry due to some function, or he had to attend a certain event in a certain amount of time. So he was in a bit of a hurry, but he did not defy any traffic rules. But in his way, he stopped by a traffic police and he said, wait, I just have to talk to you. Why are you not wearing that? Why are you not wearing this? And the person, firstly, he humbly tells him that I am in a bit of a hurry, sir. Please let me go. No, I won't let you go. You just have to give me the documents and everything. And after a couple of minutes, this person, this devotee, started fuming and he started talking in a loud tone. His tone had increased Then this traffic person suddenly says, you claim to be spiritual, but how come your voice raised? How come your volume raised? How can you practice, how can you project anger on you? Because you claim your attire seems to be a person of spirituality, who follows spirituality. The person, the devotee with a smile on his face, tells him, Sir, you're lucky to find me 6 months down the lane after adopted the spiritual concepts, this ball game of spirituality. Because had you met me 6 months earlier, my mouth would not be speaking. Instead, my hands and legs would be speaking. Now, what do we understand from this story? Every person is on a journey. We are known to judge someone saying that this person follows spirituality, but he still is accustomed to all the limitations. Everyone is a growth in progress. Just because we are able to pinpoint a certain gap in a person doesn't say anything about the practices of that person. Now, let's say that you go to a temple and somebody steals your footwear. Does that mean that you'll stop going to the temple? No, right? So essentially, there are some people who come up with justifications and excuses as to why they don't want to follow spirituality, and they will quote examples of people who had some point of time showcase some negative quality, but these people don't know about their past. How much they have evolved as a soul, only that person will realize, and only that person will be evident, who will sort of witness his own growth as an individual. Nobody from the outside who doesn't have a bird's eye view of the past of the person is just judging that person in that limited bandwidth of time, and is giving a judgment or a verdict saying that, my friend, you follow spirituality but still you have all these negative tendencies. The fact is that that person is a much better person as opposed to that person being 6 months back or 1 year back or 10 years back. So let's stop judging people. And we need to experience it ourselves. We need to be the proof of the pudding. To taste it, we need to actually taste it. Instead of sitting outside and not doing anything and pinpointing the different limitations of people who follow spirituality, why don't we give ourselves enough time to expose ourselves to this knowledge? And if there is nothing we benefit out of this, we probably can completely discard it. But if you are someone with an intellectual bent of mind, you will believe in the concept of experimentation. This beautiful understanding, let's say that you don't want to believe in any kind of spiritual concepts or spiritual thought processes or practices. There is this concept of complex numbers, which most of us probably have gone through, wherein we start with an assumption that root of -1 is equal to iota, and based on that assumption, we solve all the complex problems. Why can't we take the spiritual concepts, the belief systems which have been talked about in the domain of spirituality, and apply that in our own life and be a good judge ourselves? If we are able to reap benefits out of it, we can continue to follow those practices. But if we are not, then we are free to discard it. Now, this number 2 reason why, even though we know that's the right thing to do, we don't do it is because of the kind of associations we have, the kind of people we talk to, the kind of content we are exposed to. Did you know that associations create your desires? The kind of people you associate with sort of is instrumental in creating the type of desires you will have. Now, suppose you are surrounded with people who love to gossip, who love to just enjoy life. They don't have a higher purpose in life. The only aim in their life is to enjoy, and just to indulge in gossip or probably talk low of other people. Sooner or later, you are also going to gravitate towards the tendency of gossip, and you're going to derive pleasure out of it, and you're going to be stuck in this never-ending loop of gossip. Because let's understand how the brain works. The brain basically works on the pain and pleasure principle. It naturally gravitates towards things which gives it pleasure, and we are unconsciously stuck in a loop of habit which we know is not good for our own consciousness, but we still engage in. A certain incident which happened in my own life, I remember when I was doing my post-graduation from IIT Madras, This particular amusing incident really captivated my attention. So IIT Madras is a huge campus. People who have been in IIT Madras probably would be able to appreciate that to move from one spot to another, you cannot go by walking. You need a bus. So there used to be buses allocated at each bus stop, and to move from one department to another, or to move from one location to another in the campus, we need to go through that bus. So it so happens that one afternoon I'm just waiting in the bus stop, and I see a couple of friends, couple of students of IIT. They are having a very heated conversation, and as they approach me, I am very curious to know probably what is the reason. Probably they had a misunderstanding or some kind of a personal dispute or something of that demeanor, of that sort might have happened. I sort of thought in those terms. But when they came closer and they were still having that continuous argument, I was absolutely amused by the kind of conversation they are having. They were talking about some engineering subject and they had diverse opinions about that. And I was really amused that people are fighting over engineering concepts. This talks about their level of conversations, because in IIT most of the time you will have different kinds of people, but people who are consumed in their studies or academics, you will find these people talk about knowledge and they will be talking about the different engineering subjects. The reason I brought up this example is the people who are average, right, or even below average, they love to discuss about people. But people who are going to do something great or something substantial, you will find these people talk about ideas. They will talk about certain creative concepts, be it in the material domain or in the spiritual domain. Because our conversations shape our reality, whether the conversations we have on the outside world or the inner conversations. Both these conversations have the potential to shape our reality. And the kind of conversations you indulge in will sort of maneuver the proportion of rajas and tamas versus the sattva. And if you indulge in reckless gossip, rajas and tamas is going to increase in your system. Now, one subtle mechanics which is very interesting is, if you are someone who is constantly preoccupied with the sense of tamas, tamas is nothing but lethargy, depression, apathy, grief, intoxication, all these are characteristic hues of tamas. Now, you cannot directly go and meditate. A person who is habituated, who's having a lot of tamasic propensities, you cannot suggest him to go and meditate. Instead, we need to take a step-by-step approach, and this is the reason why the yogic culture had such nuanced and such finely curated mechanisms. If you look at the yogic system, they will never suggest you to start meditating immediately. Instead, they will ask you to do some asanas, some yogic practices, so that you essentially convert the tamas into rajas. When you do physical activity, when you exercise, when you dance, or when you move your body, essentially what you're doing is you're transmuting tamasic tendencies into rajasic tendencies. Because rajas, though they're not the best, is better than tamas. Because tamas is the lowest level of consciousness. So when you move your body, or when you get out of that lethargic state of being, you naturally are upgrading your consciousness from tamas to rajas. And after that, you can easily move to sattvic tendencies. You cannot directly take a shortcut from tamas to rajas. That's not practically feasible. And once you do that, once you are exercising and you have a good amount of circulation of blood and prana in your system, meditation becomes effortless. And after doing meditation, you will be filled with a lot of bliss and sattvic tendencies. The peace and happiness will be more enduring. Hope my today's video was a little eye-opening to you, because today's videos was not about the kind of things which is already available in YouTube. You will find a host of techniques wherein they talk about how we can raise our vibration. From exercising, from meditating, from practicing gratitude, all these are great techniques. But what they fail to talk about is the three constituent elements of consciousness and how we can go from step by step. What is the reason why exercise is recommended? They are basically converting your tamas into rajas. The reason why meditation is more effective after exercising and doing pranayama is because you have diminished, or you have lowered down the proportion of tamas in your system, and now it becomes more effortless to meditate. Because if you ask some average Joe to meditate, the moment he closes his eyes, he'll be bombarded with a lot of thoughts. Now, this is the hallmark quality of Rajasic and Tamasic propensities. So, we should be very mindful of the progressive steps we take. Hope my today's video brought a lot of perspective about what it means to truly be a high vibrational person. And if you want to go deep into what are the practical activities one can do in cultivating the Sattvic Gun, you can probably read the 14th chapter of Bhagavad Gita and also the 16th chapter of Srimad Bhagavad Gita, where Lord Krishna talks about what are the qualities of divine people and demonic people. And our inspiration and our natural striving should be towards moving from demonic to divinity. Because let's understand, no one is a saint in this world. We are essentially not living in a black and white world, but we are in shades of between. We are all shades of grey to different varieties and proportions. But when we strive towards that mode of goodness, towards cultivating more divinity instead of demonic tendencies, then Sattvagun and high vibe will become a natural state of being. And will be truly high vibrational instead of being cosmetically high vibrational. There's a huge difference in between looking to be happy and actually being happy to the core. Thank you so much for your time on my video. And if you really like the video, do give me your candid feedback. Also share this video with a couple of your friends so that they can also understand as to what it means to be a truly high vibrational being. Also subscribe to my channel if you really enjoyed the content which I am sharing on a regular basis on this channel. Thank you so much, and I'll meet you in the next video.